Hello, Mark.
Hi, Will. How are you this evening?
I'm all right now. I think people can hear us and maybe even see us, but I'm going to ask you: can you see me?
I can't, but I can see myself.
Ooh, you can see yourself. So maybe do I need to do? How about
Ah,
that?
there you are. There you are. I can see you now.
Ah, it's the technology, Mark. It's the future.
It is.
Apparently,
I don't know
apparently
if
this
I don't know if
this.
it's our future, but it's certainly the future.
Well, I'm waiting for the horseless carriage, as these newfangled motor cars are
Mm.
called, to come. Anyway, we won't start just for a mo because people are, and I'm getting notes from people saying I can see you, so I'm hoping that that works. I've got there you both are, says Shelley, so that's great. And there's Priscilla and Victoria and all sorts of people, and someone from Shamwari. Hello from Shamwari and Priscilla again. Can we get your emails? I don't know. Can we get your emails? Um, I, I guess so. Mark, yours is quite complicated, not? What's your email, Mark?
My Born Free email
Oh, yeah,
is
I don't think we're
mark,
not looking for your.
markj@bornfree.org.uk. But if people want to contact Born Free, the info@bornfree.org.uk is the right one to use.
Yes, and I'm just Will at bornfree.org.uk. But again, the best thing to do, honestly, is to go to the info at. I just saw somebody from Mauritius tuning in, and hello
Gosh,
to someone in Crewe and there we are. There's a couple of things my colleagues are helping in the chat. Hello from Bristol. Hello from Italy. Well, now what is the time? Oh, still got a minute or so to go. Oh, Uruguay. I tell you, I'm in love with this platform already. We're going to be talking. I think you've all seen the title, "The Private Keeping of Dangerous Wild Animals and the Law." Obviously, the law as it refers to the United Kingdom. I'm not sure what the law about this is in Uruguay, but or anywhere else. USA is there, Germany, Indonesia,
gosh,
uh,
this is a truly global event, which is
Kent and Hampshire.
marvelous.
Thank you, Kent and Hampshire. Hello from Horsham. Londonderry. Uh, I feel like I'm on Tanzania. I do feel like we're on the Eurovision Song Contest. It's like, and I'm calling Tanzania for your votes on the UK's entry. No point. Oh, again, never mind. South Africa, India. Well, gracious me, how lovely to have everybody on this. This is not long. Mark is going to be under pressure, because I'm going to be asking Mark questions and he's going to have to give us succinct answers to a whole range of questions that have come in relation to the keeping of wild animals in captivity by private owners in the UK. And we're going to try and answer as many of these questions as we can in about 15 minutes. So it now being 1:05, Mark, your under starters orders. So I'm going to start with the obvious question, which is it legal to keep a dangerous wild animal as a pet, or privately at least, in the UK?
Well, I think it'll surprise a lot of people to hear that, yes, it is. There's really no prohibition at all on the keeping of most species of wild animals in private ownership in the UK. But some species that are considered to be potentially dangerous to the public require a license under something called the Dangerous Wild Animals Act, and those licenses are issued by local authorities.
So, Mark, just give us a sort of a taste of what species you would need a Dangerous Wild Animals Act license for. Are there any unexpected ones, for example? I think we'd probably all go, well, tigers, but you know what I mean?
Yes. Well, I think the species for which you'd require a license are listed on what's called the schedule to the Dangerous Wild Animals Act. And most of them would be the kind of species that you'd expect. So large mammals like elephants, rhinos, big cats, and so other carnivores, bears, many reptiles, crocodiles, alligators, venomous snakes, all these kind of things. And, you know, the data that we generated from going to local authorities and asking them last year how many licenses they'd issued across England, Scotland and Wales, and for what kinds of animals, revealed that many of those many of those species are being kept under license. And this is what I think a lot of people will find very surprising. And the Ross Kemp documentary, Britain's Tiger Kings, which many people may have seen, that's aired over the past few days. It was a two-parter, and the second part aired on Tuesday evening. Featured some of those people that keep, for example, big cats, lions, tigers, and so on, primates, crocodiles, venomous snakes, and so on.
But interestingly, Mark, in those programs, I think it revealed the fact that you can keep a 18-foot long constrictor snake, and that doesn't actually require, it's not a species that's on the schedule.
Absolutely. So whilst I think most of the species that are on the schedule are the kinds of species that people might expect to see there are quite a few that aren't on that schedule and therefore don't require a license, that people would regard as being pretty dangerous potentially. And they include some of the large monitor lizards. If you wanted to try and, you know, import and own a Komodo dragon, you wouldn't require a Dangerous Wild Animals Act license for it. Large constrictor snakes, as you mentioned, the big pythons and boas and so on. And they also contain quite a number of, the Act doesn't cover quite a number of species that would be considered dangerous if they were held by, for example, a zoo, like some deer species and large birds of prey. So
that's very inconsistent, isn't it? It seems very inconsistent, and you know, I'm seeing in the chat here that people are saying, so how many individual animals are we talking about? But of course, you've already just explained, Mark, that the number that we have, which is just shy of 4,000 licenses that are held, doesn't include those species that you've also just talked about, the large constrictors, large monitor lizards, you know, Komodo dragon, if there were such a thing, certain deer species, etc., that would be regarded as dangerous. So we know that the just short of 4,000 individual animals is the minimum. And there's likely to be others that should be covered by the schedule, but that aren't. Mark, what's the criteria for this? How easy is it to get a license under the DWA?
Well, we certainly believe that it's far too easy to obtain a license, and that's really borne out by you know, the number of licenses that we've discovered that have been issued. And you know, people who have watched the Ross Kemp program will have seen the conditions in which some of these animals are being kept, which certainly to our eyes as an animal welfare focused organisation are very, very far from being suitable for these animals. And we have to remember that, you know, these animals are being kept in captivity in people's private homes, or in, you know, effectively in large sheds or enclosures on their private land. But these are wild animals. They haven't been domesticated and bred for domestication over hundreds or thousands of years like the dogs and cats that we commonly keep in our homes. They're wild animals. They're really, in the vast majority of cases, not suited to being kept in captivity in the UK.
Before we just quickly touch on the welfare side, I mean, could it be claimed that keeping these animals is serving certain species, at any rate, is serving a conservation purpose?
I certainly don't believe so. The private keeping of animals people who are keeping these animals privately in the UK, and whatever they might claim, are not contributing in any significant way to species conservation. And indeed, the trade in wild animals as exotic pets, and as we've said, the 4,000 that we've discovered that are being held under license is just the tip of a very much larger iceberg in terms of the total numbers. The trade can be extremely damaging to conservation, because in many cases species are being taken from the wild in order to supply the demand for for wild animals as pets in the UK, in Europe, in North America, in other parts of the world. So it's, you know, people who keep lions or primates or crocodiles or venomous snakes in their houses or gardens are not contributing to conservation. These, you know, the keeping of these animals in private homes serves no conservation purpose whatsoever.
And what, thinking now of those individual animals, what do, as a vet, what are your thoughts about the welfare implications for this?
Well, as I think it was put very well in the Ross Kemp documentary when it was said that these animals are kind of stuck between a limbo. They're wild animals, they're not suited to captivity, they haven't been bred for a life in captivity or a life living in close proximity to people. The vast majority of them are not suited to the kind of environment and the weather conditions and the climatic conditions that we have in the UK. But they're stuck in captivity in the UK, and you know, in the vast majority of cases, they're not suited anymore to release back into the wild because maybe there's nowhere to put them, or they haven't grown up and learnt how to survive and thrive in the wild. So you can imagine that in terms of, you know, their welfare and their welfare needs, they're not being met in the vast majority of cases in captivity. A lot of these animals have, you know, very complex welfare needs in terms of their physical welfare, in terms of their mental state, in terms of their social requirements. You know, a lot of these are social animals that would live in groups in the wild, in complex social groups. In a lot of cases, we don't even fully understand what the needs of these species are. But one thing's for certain, and that's that when they're being kept in the kind of captive conditions that many people will have seen on that documentary, those welfare needs are not being adequately met by any stretch of the imagination.
So if, well, certainly as you and I see it, the situation is so sort of out of control and unfit for purpose. What is it, given what you've said, these animals are very unlikely to be candidates for release back into the wild. I mean, almost impossible to do that. That sanctuaries tend to be pretty full and zoos are pretty full. Some of these animals may not have a clear sort of history. So, you know, a zoo would say, well, I don't know if this is a hybrid tiger or not, therefore we're not going to take it on. What can we do? What should be done? Not can what we do, but what should be done, given that these animals are legally held at the moment?
Exactly. Well, what we're calling for, and we've launched a petition to government on the UK government e-petition site, so anyone who's resident in the UK can sign on to that petition, and we've launched that in collaboration with the RSPCA just a couple of days ago. But what we're calling for is a review of the whole situation, really, not just of dangerous wild animals, but the whole issue of the trading and keeping of wild animals as pets in the UK. You know, what we're urging for is that before an animal can be kept as a pet in the UK, it should meet certain criteria, and that's a guarantee that the welfare needs of the individual animals can be met in captivity, and I think that would exclude the vast majority of species that are currently kept and traded. A guarantee that the trade doesn't compromise the conservation of species or populations, and we've talked a little bit about that because many of these animals will be taken from the wild in order to supply the trade. A guarantee that there won't be any wider environmental concerns, such as animals escaping and then causing a problem for our native fauna here in the UK, or even escaping and breeding or being deliberately released, as some are at times because people, you know, don't want to look after them anymore and don't know what else to do with them, and establishing populations in our local environment which can be harmful. And of course, that there are no risks to the wider health and safety of people or animals. So I think a much stricter criteria on which decisions around whether certain species should be allowed to be traded and held by individuals need to be put in place. And I think, you know, if we applied those strictly, with the welfare and well-being of animals and the populations they come from at the forefront of our minds, as well as the health and safety of people, then we'd find that you know, an awful lot of the species that are currently being held quite legally would no longer fit, wouldn't fulfill those criteria.
I'm interested, Mark, in a phrase called a sunset clause. I think I don't want to get too technical here, but you know, we are talking about thousands of animals, and no charity, no sanctuary is going to have anything like the capacity to take on these animals should they become available progressively, even over a period of time. What is a sunset clause, and how might that, as a procedure, help this process?
Well, it's quite interesting because the UK government has, and we, you know, this is something we're supportive of, consulted recently on proposals to end or certainly severely restrict the keeping of primates as pets in the UK. So that's a good start. It's only the consultation process at the moment, but in that consultation there were some questions about what would happen to the animals that are currently being kept legally in private ownership were a ban on the keeping of primates to be introduced. So the sunset clause, some people call it sort of grandfather clause, that is usually included is that those animals that are currently in private ownership and that can't be relocated to a sanctuary or released back into the wild in some way could remain in the ownership of their current owners for the rest of their natural lives. But that would be conditional on them not breeding from those animals, because that simply perpetuates the problem, and those owners being able to provide those animals with at least a basic level of welfare to ensure their good health and well-being throughout the rest of their natural lives. So there'd need to be some kind of licensing process introduced in order to help to phase out the keeping of those species that don't meet the kind of criteria that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I've noticed in the chat, you know, there's been several comments where people have said, look, you know, setting criteria for keeping these animals, these species in captivity, is itself a compromise, and isn't it sort of better to go for a ban? But I think what you're explaining, Mark, is that even if the legislation were changed tomorrow by magic that banned the keeping of a whole raft of different animals, wild animals, by private individuals, there are consequences. And so we need to think through what the consequences are, and then what the actions we need to take to try and make sure that those animals are looked after for the rest of their lives, that no more are brought in, that no more are bred, and that over a period of time, as short a period of time as is humanely possible, this whole situation is brought to a close.
Absolutely.
Mark, what do you think people can do about this? Individuals, got lots of people on this who are saying, what can actually be done now to move this forward?
Well, I think we've generated a whole discussion about this among the public, among politicians. Obviously, you know, this interview that we're doing now helps to increase the knowledge and information that people have about this issue. So we've launched 2 actions that people can take on our website over the past couple of days. One is the government e-petition that I mentioned earlier. That's on the UK government site. So we'd really encourage people to go to our website. That's www.bornfree.org.uk. The links to the things that you can do are all over our front page at the moment, so it should be very easy to find. And there you can find the link to the government e-petition, which was launched by ourselves in collaboration with the RSPCA on Tuesday, and sign that petition. And if we manage to get enough signatures, that will stimulate initially a response from government when we reach 10,000 signatures, and hopefully over the next few weeks and months, if we can get to 100,000 signatures, it should help to prompt a debate in the House of Parliament on this particular issue. And people can also write to their own MP and ask them to support the call for a debate on this issue, and to call on the Secretary of State DEFRA, the responsible department, to make parliamentary time for such a debate. And there's details on how they can do that as well, and some information on the kind of things that people might want to include in a letter to their MP on our website.
And finally, Mark, and I thank you everybody for all the comments. The question is, so if here am I, and I don't know whether, on my patch, there's a dangerous wild animal or not. And I know that through the Freedom of Information Act, you can get certain information. You can't get it down to household level. You can't get the name of the person who has a license, but you can get a sense of the animals in your local authority area that require and have been licensed under the DWA. How can people find out about that if they're concerned and they want to find out, well, what's going on in Mole Valley, my local council?
You're absolutely right, and we mentioned the data that we got from local authorities last year, and that was all done on the Freedom of Information. So we obtained data from most local authorities across England, Scotland and Wales last year on the numbers, the licenses that they'd issued and the species that they'd been issued for. Now, as you say, it doesn't take us down to that granular level of exactly who owns the animal and exactly where they are. But if you're interested or concerned about the possibility of dangerous wild animals being in your local area, you can go onto our website and there's a link to an interactive map of Great Britain, and you can click on the local authority in your area and it will tell you whatever information we manage to obtain on what's being held in that area. And if people are concerned, they can write to their local authority, and there are details again of how you can do that on our website, and ask them. And if they know of animals that they consider to be dangerous, or where animals are being kept in a way which they're concerned about, so they're concerned for their own safety, they may be concerned about the safety of the owners or the people who are visiting the house, and obviously the conditions in which the animals are being kept, then they can also write to their local authority and ask them if they're aware whether a license should have been issued, and if so, whether it has been issued, and flag those issues with their local authority. And of course, they can also flag the issues with us, flag the issues with the RSPCA, if they're concerned about the welfare of the animals themselves.
Yeah, Mark, I mean, I know it's been quick, but I think it's been highly informative on behalf of the audience who've been filing questions and comments, which I've tried to capture some of throughout the last 20 minutes. I want to thank you. I did see one go by that said, here I am in the US, what can I do? And one thing you could do, because our sister organization, Born Free USA, is deeply concerned about these issues, and in the USA, the situation is considerably worse. So if you want to get in touch with Born Free USA or support their work, it's www.bornfreeusa.org. Listen to Mrs. Oxford and to everyone else who's popping up on the chat, as there's Molly. Thank you so much, Rose Bellart. Thank you, Ches. Thank you all very much indeed. And we may do this again, not immediately, because we're developing our long-term communication strategy right now, but I think this has worked rather well. So look out for another alert in due course. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Well. Thanks, everyone.